Hello, I'm Bernie Martin Beck, and it's my privilege to talk to people around our neighborhoods here in Southern Oregon and Northern California. And I like family stories, but this one beats any story that I've ever talked about. This little fella here, he looks like Lord Fauntleroy.
Yes.
Tell me, he isn't a proper lord at all.
No, my grandmother was in Douglas. Her husband was a doctor and a revolutionist, and she had his picture taken there in Douglas.
Which is very much in the Spanish style of grandeur, wouldn't you say? That poise, the whole thing. You are Doloris?
Doloris Huerta Lloyd.
And this guy is?
Well,
What's his name?
He was named Manuel Huerta, but he took the name later of Henry when he went in the service. His middle name is Enrique, and Henry is the anglicized name for Enrique.
Yeah, I have a brother, Enrique. Mm-hmm. He grew, and here he is in his knickers. I guess those are knickers.
That looks like it. He went to Los Angeles to visit his grandmother, and his aunt and cousin were there. That's his cousin Doloris, and I was named after her.
Ah, a Spanish name.
Yes.
Well, the connection here between this family and the lady next to you comes right here.
Yes.
Who is this lady? Would you introduce yourself, please?
I am Sharon McCracken, Heston, and you can see that Doloris and I have known each other for a few years.
Well, left one is who?
The left one would be, my left would be Doloris, and I'm on my right there.
And these two little girls knew one another?
Oh.
Your mothers knew one another, pre-made
yes.
before you were born?
That's right.
And you both were born about the same time, went to school?
Yes, well, Doloris is much older than I.
A whole month.
A month.
Oh, so you'd have picnics together or Thanksgiving dinners
Thanksgiving dinner and 4th of July picnics occasionally. And I don't know what day this was, but it was a trip down the Illinois River where we stopped at a little stream, and Doloris rode the donkeys. I was afraid of the donkeys, so I didn't do that. And there's another one there of a swinging bridge that used to go across the Illinois River.
Oh, how much fun that was to have a swinging bridge. Oh, I wish that, yeah.
It was there for many years. I don't know when they took that old bridge down.
I think they is the river.
The river did it? Well,
yes.
probably
I'm not
so.
sure.
Washed it out. Huh?
But this is family fun. Oh, knickers again and boots. Look at those handsome shoes. Oh, my goodness. Now, your families were more than friends. They just didn't bother to tell the kids?
They were actually, our fathers were stepbrothers.
Your fathers were stepbrothers. Now, you got to fill that in again.
Well, my grandmother, after her husband died in the Revolution, married her grandfather.
Who was a soldier at the border.
Yes, and he was in the cavalry, and I think that's why those pants, those are actually jodhpurs.
Oh, they are.
Yes, and they're for riding horses.
Mm-hmm.
So
how in the world these two fellas got to know one another is the rest of the story.
Okay.
You said there's...
My grandfather died before before Mr. Shipman met my grandmother. He met her Actually, he met her at the railroad station. She had gone to see her family, and she was waiting there with her young child, and he was there, and he spoke to her, and it wasn't usual in that day to speak to a stranger, and so she did not speak to him very much. I think she just said,
a very proper Latin lady of some means at one time. Is that right?
Yes. Family were the Almadas from Alamos. They had the silver mines there in the last century, in the 19th century.
And they would winter in California because it was so miserably hot down there?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to let people buy the book and hear the rest of this intrigue, because it is so rich. And you women have been so open about stories that aren't usually talked about over tea. May I say
Maybe
that?
over tea, not yet.
we brought all the skeletons out of the closet.
You certainly did. And what was your purpose? Truth? And
It was such a good story, we decided it just had to be written.
Well, I knew too that just as we were discovering this, both of our parents died or had died previously, and all of the aunts and uncles were gone. And I was thinking, why didn't we ask these questions 10 years ago? And I thought, no, this time we're going to get everything on paper so that our children, if they're ever interested, will at least know where to go to find out the story.
And you both have children.
Yes.
I have 2 girls, and
I have 3 boys and a girl.
So what do they think of your book? I mean, this is just hot off the press, right?
Actually, I have the books in the car right now that I'm going to send to them.
To the children.
They haven't.
They don't know the intrigue here.
I have one daughter and one granddaughter that participated in the making of this book. So the one granddaughter has read it already. She did some of the graphic work on it.
Oh, fun. Now this comes right here in Southern Oregon, right? This is who we're talking about?
That's my father.
And the little one?
And me.
Oh, that's you. And what's the bike? Do you know?
It's a Harley. I will say it wasn't a very dependable Harley.
Uh-oh. And then as you kids grew up, you're in this picture?
Yes, I'm trying to see. I'm the one that is really in the center, almost in the front, and the other girls are the Schutzwald girls.
Oh, you mean
Marie, Hattie, and Margie.
the name of Schutzwald, that's where you lived, right?
We lived right by Schutzwald Lane.
And you had property?
Actually, it was my grandmother and her husband had property right there. The boundaries of the property were on Allen Creek and Nebraska Avenue, and Allen Creek ran, the actual creek ran right through the center of the property. It was an 80-acre homestead.
And the Schutzwald farm, did they have 80 acres also?
I think they had, I'm not sure.
But they had a large farm right next to it.
And I was there this week, folks. I mean, I just can't imagine an 80-acre parcel. And Grandpa was going to farm it. He had animals and...
Yes.
And did your family go there to...
My father went to live with his father there on the homestead, and the idea was, yes, to farm it, and to he was just starting to gather animals. They were only there about 4 years. They arrived in 1920, and he died in 1924. So he was just getting that homestead started.
And how did he die?
He died in an accident with a very bad-tempered boar.
Oh.
He wanted to raise hogs, and he was feeding the hogs, and the boar just attacked him, or somehow gored him, and he bled to death. My grandfather bled to death, before his wife, Henrietta, could reach help, there were men down in the valley nearby that were digging, putting in the irrigation system. And they did come, but she had a hard time making them understand what had happened. And they rushed him to the hospital, but I think he was really gone before they got to the hospital.
Yes, it was her lack of English, command of the English language when that caused that problem.
Especially when she was excited and
Yeah, she was
frightened, and
all
she
excited
couldn't-
and forgot her English completely and was speaking to them in Spanish and couldn't get them to understand.
And then at the hospital, some people in the valley will remember Dr. C.J. Mosier. And he was the doctor that signed the death certificate of my grandfather after when he bled to death.
Oh, yes. My Aunt Ruth worked for Dr. Mosher.
Is that right? Well,
yes.
he was here for, many years.
Yeah. Which dad is this?
That's my dad. And after, actually, it's mentioned in the epilogue that he was in the 3 Cs, the Conservation Corps, and he was at the mouth of Pistol River there. The other one with the Harley is up at Crater Lake, and he also spent a lot of time out of Selma down on the Illinois River. He helped to build a trail going up behind Store Gulch back to Briggs Creek.
Well, now, CCC camp really was Roosevelt's idea of getting people back to work. Is that right?
Yes, they made $1 a day,
Oh.
and that was pretty good. He was working before that for 50 cents a day.
But part of that money went back to the family to support the family.
That's right, they sent $5 back to the family. No, they sent $25. The person that was working got $5 of it.
And that should take care of razor blades and chewing gum. And
Well, he didn't buy razor blades and chewing gum with that.
what did he do?
He gave it to the family. He would save his $5 and give it to the family, and the family lived on $5 a month.
Oh, my goodness. Now, who is this one?
That's my grandfather, Manuel Huerta.
In the days when?
That was during, probably just prior to the big revolution that they had.
1910, 1912, that period.
But he was really a physician, right?
Yes, and I think that's why he's in a white uniform. I think that he was caring for wounded and so on.
Well, he's certainly smart. But when he came to Arizona,
He and my grandmother had just married, probably been married about 6 months when they moved to the border. Douglas was a very interesting little town then. It had been started by a man named Douglas, and it was a up-and-coming little planned community, and they had a smelter there.
For copper.
well, now, tell me your favorite parts of this. I mean, what was it like where'd you do your research, first of all?
We went to Alamos and looked around there, took pictures. Same thing in Spain. We went to La Coruña and over to Ribadeo and Mero, where my grandfather was born. And we learned there that he probably, he would have left from La Coruña, so that's why the name of the first chapter when he was leaving, La Coruña.
So written into this, every page is intrigue and mystery. Both, I mean, well, do you call them polygamists, or do you just call them
Bigamist.
Bigamist.
a bigamist? There's only two, right?
Yes.
In both cases, there's a mystery.
Yes, that's right. In both cases.
10 years of absentee history.
Yes,
That's right.
yes.
But what you've done is research the history of the times, written into it truth.
Yes, we use the actual history in helping to fill in those big gaps.
What about the LA Times? I think I heard something.
Oh, I had the date of my grandfather's death, and so I looked in the paper in the LA Times. I thought,
You're researching.
yes, and I decided that I would just look in the old papers to see if it said anything about my grandfather's death. And it did. And it came as a big shock to me. It said that he was hung.
Oh.
And I was really set back. It was completely unexpected. My grandmother had never mentioned this, and when I asked my dad, he didn't know about it. And he was kidnapped from Douglas and taken across the border and hung there with three other men. I guess 4 were hung right then, and there were a few, they kept hanging accomplices.
These are people who we'd call, they were revolutionaries who weren't on the winning side.
Yes.
Oh, no.
It's very unfortunate to be on the losing side.
Now, was this, you obviously have shared your shock with us here on TV. Did she know?
No.
No.
What happened next? You pick up the phone and say,
when I was looking at the paper, the shock just was overwhelming. And then later on, or actually it was, my grandmother had told me that her husband was kidnapped. I knew that, but the shock was him being hung. She said that he was killed across the border by these men. And she was a stronger person than I. She knew he'd been hung. She'd been told that she'd be shot if she crossed the border.
oh,
And she put on a veil and put on her black dress to go across the border, and she went to find her husband, his body, and which she didn't. But she walked all the way to the graveyard. The bodies were no longer hanging in the square, and so she walked to the graveyard. She looked there. She found the bodies of the other 3 that were killed, but her husband wasn't there. So she left some flowers that she had purchased on the way and came back.
you folks can see why I am so excited. I mean, these are 2 kids in your high school class who had no idea.
And it
That-
goes back to such a terrible incident, that terrible hanging. They supposedly hung him for a gold robbery, but the more we explored it, the more we found that there were revolutionary implications, that the gold robbery may have even been done by a third party or a third group. There was a man living in the city of Douglas who was a taxi driver, whose name was John Lurch. And he had a car that had a special compartment built into the floor of his car where he could smuggle things back and forth across the border, primarily, I suppose, liquor and eventually maybe gold. And the more we explored, we finally found a man who was related to this John Lurch, and that's the story of Bramble.
Yes.
In the back of the book, there's a story, we just left it the way it was, the story that Bramble, a little boy named Bramble, told. And so another of our trips, besides Spain and besides Mexico and besides Douglas was a trip to Las Vegas, because this man, Jim Rogers, and his wife were living in Las Vegas, and they gave us the story of Bramble, a little boy who saved his uncle John Lurch from, I guess, a lynching, hanging by putting him into the back of a car, covering him up, and taking off for parts unknown out of Douglas. And so that story made us, well, he said that Lurch had the gold and that it was buried for a time in the slag heap of the copper mine. You know, somebody went back and dug up the gold, and we think that John Lurch had part of it, because John Lurch ended up in California, where he purchased an orange grove. And so we think that's what happened to the money from what actually happened to the money from the robbery.
And so Grandpa was hung probably without a fair trial.
Oh.
Lynchings never come with trials.
Not much of a trial.
What do they call it? It was Plutarco Calles, who later was president of Mexico, who interrogated him at a
governor or something at the time, a more minor position at the time.
Yes, and he interrogated him and the other men, and then pronounced that they were guilty of the robbery, and sent them into Agua Prieta to be hung.
Within hours. They kidnapped them at midnight, and they were hung by, what, in the morning, 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock in the morning. So it wasn't a very long trial.
Wow. And now we're talking about this man?
Yes.
His name is?
Manuel Huerta.
And we're talking about this man?
That name he was going by in that picture was Robert Clarence Shipman. His name was actually William Kelsey McCracken.
And in the middle brings us together
My grandmother, Enriqueta Haskell Almada.
And she's married to
First
this man
him,
and
second
this
him.
man.
Yes.
And both of these men have previous wives. Is that right?
Yes.
Do I have this straight?
You have that straight, yes.
The fact that the two of you have worked together so diligently, come here with your two husbands just so that we could dine together and hear your story and put it on film. I think we could write a book.
Well, why don't we do that? Why don't we do that?
The book is available at Amazon.
Amazon.com, yes.
And at your local historic society. It's one that's splendid read aloud, as my husband did. It was like, oh, another chapter today. Oh, and one over lunch. Let's have another chapter over lunch. Now, when you get together, is this the way is your?
To the left is Jack McCracken, her
back
father, and next is my father, who went by Henry Huerta. And those two, I think you knew one of them.
Yes, this was my mother's half-sister, quite a bit younger, and I'm not sure who the young person was.
Folks, if you could help fill out any of these details, these young women would love it.
We need all the information we can get.
When I asked them to be on TV with me, and I learned their story at the book signing, they said, well, you'll be back from Arizona come,
And it's
after
in the
the
spring.
winter.
I said, you'll have to wait till next summer because I'll be gone.
And then came this phone call that said, let's do it sooner because.
Well, because Doloris and I have both had some health problems over the past couple of years, and we thought we'd like to wrap it all up before this winter, that we'd like to have it on tape, have the book finished, and have it all wrapped up, just in case.
Yes,
Well,
life
and
is
now is the time to
That's
do
right.
anything.
Now is the time to do whatever you want to do. Life is uncertain.
Yes, I know, and I've had health problems, so that's the three of us that said today.
Today is the day.
Friendship that's lasted for a lifetime.
76 years.
Yes.
And your families brought together through the oddest set of circumstances I think I've
right.
ever heard. And those of you who are interested in the rest of the story, it's all here. I thank you so much for not brown paper wrappering the whole thing. I mean, this is truth. This is beautiful exposition of who you folk are and what's made you so strong.
And it shows the evidence of what a crime in the past, the tendrils, the effects that it has on future generations. It's, the story doesn't end just because someone commits a crime. It goes on having ripples in the water, in the lake. The ripples go on.
Poetic. These people have written a wonderful book. Your final comments here as we wrap up the show.
We dedicated this book to our children and our grandchildren. Maybe you could just open it up and read that. I can't read it right now.
Yeah. And it says, what I love, oh, Douglas, my husband has, there's the map of Mexico so we can see exactly what all we're talking about. And it's dedicated, we'll just put that up on the film and people can read it for themselves.
All right.
This is just wonderful. And if anyone wants that printed out, just contact Better Life Television and we'll have it on a card.
Thank you for having us, Bernie. This was,
Yes,
was a
thank
nice
you.
experience for us.
Thank you so very much for being my guest, and thank you for tuning in to Better Life Television and Journeys and Journals. I'll say bye for now.